Good evening, everyone. We continue our study in the book of Daniel. We are now in chapter 7. We left off yesterday in verse 25. I'd like to pick up from verse 25 because it will guide us to the end of this chapter. We are actually discussing the fourth monster, or we call the fourth beast. Remember the first three monsters. This is the nightmare of Daniel. The first one is identified as Babylon, the second as Medo Persia, the third as the Grecian Empire, and the fourth monster is really the Roman Empire. I need us to bear in mind that the details that were given to us, and it is very selective because Daniel only chose the highlights, enough of the details to give us an idea of what kingdom it is. And because of those kingdoms, they had leaders or kings, and it can be identified. And now with the Roman Empire, the fourth monster, is very different and it terrified Daniel. Now, I need us also to remember every time we look at prophetic imagery, when we are looking at what Daniel has been dreaming and the visions that he sees, you know that we are not given a lot of details because as this angel that Daniel was speaking to had alluded that the four monsters are really four kingdoms. And the 10 horns are really 10 kings. And so what we are seeing is that the interest here is to identify the kingdoms and also in particular what is happening with that kingdom in relations to the nation of Israel, or in this case, Judah, the Jewish nation. Because right now we are looking at the southern kingdom, but eventually we are still looking at the entire 12 tribes, Ezekiel 37. But what we must always bear in mind is that these, what we call eschatological ideas that is presented in the dreams and visions of Daniel, is primarily relating to the Jewish nation. It is not for anybody else to have a private insistence that it refers to something totally different. It is for Daniel then to look at now the fourth beast, the monster that really terrifies him, because he is looking at the beast that is going to be for a long time. Now, what is going to be a long time would be this. He is at the time of the first monster, which is the Babylonian Empire. Then it will be the next few successive empires. But this last Roman Empire appears to be extremely difficult and terrifying. And he says this, and this will be little horn. The little horn is a king, and it can also be an aspect of dominion that is over the people of God, called the holy ones of the highest. He will speak against God, also called here the Most High, and oppress the holy ones of the highest one. And this would be the holy ones, not saints. And remember, all of these has to do with God's people. He, which is the little horn, plans to make changes to the appointed times and the Torah. And so this particular idea that the little horn will continue to go against the Most High, as well as the Jewish nation, intends to change their appointed times, as well as the Torah that they have been taught. This little horn is that arrogant, and they will be handed over to him for time. And then it tells us here, times and half a time. And I just want to spend a little bit of time to explain to us how the Jews look at time, because it will be for a time, for a period of time. And this period of time is known as times and half a time. Times would be 2 times the singular time. Half a time is literally half of that. The Jewish people always uses the temple as the milestones. The temple is representing the presence of God. And in that presence of God, they will see that as their measurement. And hence, in looking at Daniel chapter 7, when we look at for a time, for a period, how long, it is times and half a time, they'll be looking at the first period of time is from Exodus to the building of the first temple. That is considered a first period. And this is First Kings chapter 6. And so in this period of time, there were 480 years. And from that first temple to the point in time when to the point in time where it was destroyed. Of course, now we're looking backwards and they're trying to look for ways to explain this. This really is 410 years. And so all in all, we have a total of 410 plus 480 plus 410, and you will get 890 years. With this, then you find that if we have this as 890 years, then half that time, which is half of 890, is actually 445 years. And so we have times and half this time gives us a total of 1,335 years. Now, this sounds like a very odd number. Now, all I'm saying is these numbers are worked backwards. It is a way that the Jewish people are looking at this idea of times and half a time, whereby you get a period of 1,335 years. And this actually corresponds to Daniel chapter 12 and in verse 12. And so I will leave it at that for the time being, so that we'll come back to this. Now, why are we talking about this? Is because in all explanations that we need to look at, all these times and half of that time has to do with the Jewish nation. It cannot be with other nations. Nobody can sit back and look at world history. There are many empires in the world. at that time as well, but they have nothing to do with the dream of Daniel, because the dream of Daniel is God's communication to Daniel to understand the implications of history upon the Jewish nation. Very similar to Nebuchadnezzar's dream of the metallic image. Any other explanation would be superfluous, because if it has nothing to do with the Jewish nation, then it would just be a futile exercise. These what we call historical or future history visions and dreams solely has to do with the Jewish nation. It will obviously impact world history, but not primarily, but secondarily. So the primary influence of the dreams and visions that we have seen in the four monsters that Daniel has dreamt and really shocked him is this, that from the period of the temple being destroyed is a period of 890 years. That is something that he knows. But what he does not know is that there will be a period of time where there will be a second temple built and destroyed as well. So, what we have here is the history of Daniel that he probably can relate to, but not about the future. And if that is in his mind, the destruction of the first temple is scary enough. The destruction of the second temple is even more terrifying. Verse 26. Verse 26 now tells us that once this happens, the little horn is going to be a long-term influence. The long-term influence is going to tell us that after the temple is destroyed, there will also be a future period of time where there will be more and more oppression. More and more oppression by this influence, where it will alter or attempt to change the appointed times or the appointments of the Jewish people, as well as their laws, their Torah. And hence, there will be an effort to tell them that what they do is no longer relevant, and that the people will no longer be relevant. And obviously, it will also scare Daniel. For how long would this occur? It says that the court, in verse 26, the court will convene for judgment, and his dominion will be taken away, annihilated, and destroyed forever. Now, these are what we call Aramaic language, and we need to understand this. It says here, the court will convene. It is not exactly that. It says that the judgment will be set. Will be set. Not a court will convene. The judgment will be decided that this is going to end. His dominion will be taken away. It will be taken away means he's not going to give it up. It is going to be by force. This is about the future dominion of the little horn that will be removed. Then it says here, it will be annihilated. The idea of annihilated here comes from this word that corresponds to shamat. It is to be exterminated. These are very serious words. Exterminated, annihilated. It will be a complete removal of their presence. And then it will be destroyed forever. Now, this idea of destroy forever, I think we'll need to understand that it is going to vanish. It's going to vanish. And it says here, it's not vanish forever, it's vanish until the end. And this is important for us to take note. The end. And this word here is not forever. This word here is sof, like in the sofit, the ending letter of a word. This is called the end of a period. So it is not forever. So what does this mean? It means that as God is looking at this progress, the little horn's influence is very important to know. It will come a point in time where it will come to an end. When it comes to an end, it will be removed and it will vanish. This little horn's influence will disappear. And this is called the end period. It is very different from how most people think of end times. When the Bible in verse 26 talks about the end, it is the end of the little horn's influence, but it is going to begin a new period of time, which is the messianic period. And so we will read this now. Then the sovereignty, the dominion, and the greatness of all the kingdoms under the whole heaven will be given to the people of the saints of the highest one. Now, remember, this word saints does not exist. It should mean the holy ones. And notice, this is not only about the four kingdoms, it is about the kingdoms under the heavens. When you say the kingdoms under the heavens, it will be the kingdoms that exist at this time. These kingdoms, not only the little horn will be around, there will be other kingdoms under the skies, under the heavens, and all the greatness, the you would say that the powers of all the kingdoms will be given to the Jewish nation. Now, obviously, people will think, hey, this seems to be a very arrogant statement. There is nothing to judge about arrogance because it is not the Jewish people making the statement. This statement is actually made and conveyed, number one, through the dreams or the nightmares of Daniel. And number two, the meaning of what was going to transpire is given by one of those who were standing before the Ancient of Days, one of the angelic beings that is disclosing to Daniel that they would get the kingdom at the end days, and that kingdom will be a messianic kingdom and it will perpetuate. That is the indication that's given, which tells Daniel not all is lost, but we have no idea when that is to come. Because it says here, his kingdom, which is the kingdom of the highest one, will be an everlasting kingdom. This everlasting kingdom is one of, uh, in Hebrew, it's called Olam. In Aramaic, is Alam. It means for a really long time. There is no idea called forever and everlasting. It's for a long time. And then it says here, and all empires will serve and obey him. Now, this word empire is dominions. Dominions will be governments. This word here, dominion, for some reason, the translator likes to change this to empires, right? But what is important for us to remember is when the time comes, you find that the Messianic kingdom will continue for a long time, for Olam. And during this time, the holy ones will be there, and the Messiah will reign on behalf of God over his people. But there are other kingdoms, there are other dominions. But what they do is that they will be subservient to this particular kingdom. Now, back to this question, is this a very arrogant way of speaking? And the answer is really no. The reason why it is not is because this is not said by the Jewish people. This is spoken by God Himself. It is the angel that is describing that the rock that smashed the metallic image in the dream of Nebuchadnezzar, and this final kingdom, that the little horn's dominion will disappear, everybody else will be subservient and listen to the rule of God's kingdom, is going to be the final kingdom for a long time. It is not a Jewish people's statement. It is a divine revelation that is talking about a future in the plan of God, that there will be large turbulence, influence, persecution of the Jewish nation. Now, does that mean that there are no persecution of other people? Obviously, there will be. But in this particular dream, it is not of particular interest where it has nothing to do with the Jewish nation. The holy ones of the Most High is the focus of the nightmare of Daniel. And hence, what then should be the attitude of Daniel of this entire uh, dream, or you call the nightmare? Because it is really stirring him, making him afraid, and making him very terrified. We come to our final verse of chapter 7. It says, at this point, it really should translate as until here. Until here means he had the dream, he's in the dream, he is living the nightmare in his dream. And so he asked an angel who was standing before the Ancient One, what does it all mean, particularly the fourth monster? And the explanation ends here. And when the explanation ends, it says, at this point, the revelation ended. And this word ended is also the same word as uh, the idea of ending, as we saw that just now, the idea of Sophit in verse 26, which is this word here. This word is Soph. And the word Soph literally means end. And this word is also Soph. It has concluded. The dream or the nightmare has concluded. Now, in the dream, he also received understanding. And we read now his response. He woke up. We have to see this. After it ended, he woke up. Remember, when we first read chapter 7, he had the dream, and then when he woke up, he wrote down his dream. But what we are reading are only highlights of what he wrote down. And then now that we come back to the first point in the earlier part of this chapter, this would be in verse 1. Then we are told of his response. It says, "As for me, Daniel, my thoughts were greatly alarming me, and my face became pale, but I kept the matter to myself." Let us first understand the text, and then we will talk about the reaction. This is about Daniel's response. Daniel's response is very specific. And then he says, "My thoughts." This idea of thought, it is in his mind, it is mental state. His mental state shows that he is very disturbed, very alarmed, very dismayed. These are all very good words. Greatly alarming me. He is very troubled. Now that he knows what it means, he's even more troubled. And then he described, "My face became pale." And so this word here literally means um, my my face changed. So you can say face changed, or you can say change brightness. One of the description in this passage, when it says face became pale, it literally means the face changed the brightness. It was very bright and now it's very dull. This is a very Eastern way of expression because it is very concrete. You're looking at Daniel's face, that instead of very vibrant and very excited, his face became dull or pale, or the brightness went away. And that is what it means by pale here. It means that he is now very scared. And then he says here, "I kept the matter to myself." And this word here, "to myself," literally means in my heart, not in my head. My thoughts were in the head, but I kept the matter in my heart, meaning the decisions and the will to do anything, he is holding it back. He is not sharing with other people. Now we read it is when it has been penned down for us. But at this time of the dream, when he rose from his dream or the nightmare, it is really terrifying him. And all of these words, change color, change to pale, alarming, they are all talking about how scared Daniel was. We have seen Daniel from chapter 1, and Daniel appeared fearless in light of King Nebuchadnezzar. He has gone through numerous kings. He is not afraid of anyone. But now, in the dream or the nightmare that God has conveyed to him, he is extremely fearful. He is so frightened. His the blood to his face has gone away. It is no longer bright, but now dull and pale. It is a description of how he feels inside. Now, obviously, the Aramaic language, like the Hebrew language, don't use a lot of feeling type statements. But here in verse 28, it is using some concrete words to describe how he feels inside. And Words cannot describe how scared Daniel was, and he has nobody to talk to. This was communicated to him by God in a dream. Now, obviously, we can say that Daniel is a prophet, a Navi, but he's not a prophet in the traditional sense where a prophet is always sent to the people of God. But he is now given messages for the people of God that is with reference to the future days. Not something to talk about today, but something to be reserved for the future. It's a very unusual nightmare or unusual communication. So he is not ranked together with the prophets uh, of God because he wasn't sent to rebuke the people, to teach the people, to exhort the people, to warn the people. But he still would be, because the message that he receives is meant for the future generations. This is a highly, highly unusual revelation of God conveyed through dreams and visions, or what we would call nightmares that terrified Daniel. And he must have understood something. And the understanding that he has is that things are not going to be over and not so soon. He is now in the period of the Babylonian Empire, the tail end of it, in the first year of Belshazzar. So there will be more kingdoms that will come. And so if you were Daniel, you too will be wondering, hey, after all these years, this 70 years, you mean it is not going to be over? There will be more coming. And that is what scares Daniel. Now, I would like us to take a step back and remind ourselves we should not try to say more than the text. The text is all that was given to us because it is all that Daniel had decided to pen. Obviously, he had seen a whole lot more that he has not written down for us today, at least. From chapter 7, it is in the first person. He is writing himself. And so when he writes, he talks about himself having a dream, and in the dream, he does things to find out because there's nobody else to tell him the dream. He is the one who tells dreams. And so when he has dreams, who does it go to? There is no other Daniel to talk about. And so he resolves his questions in the same dream that he has with the ones who is standing before the Ancient of Days, the angels. With this in mind, we need to always bear in mind, don't try to stray too far away. Don't be dogmatic on the details, but know for a fact that we are only interested in the empires that were told to Daniel. And so when we look back, it will be the Babylonian, the Medo-Persian, the Grecian, the Roman, and the Roman is the scariest of them all, with a little horn that is going to continue not only to oppress the Jews, but to continue to do that until the end, whenever that end is. And God will decide. The period of time is times and half a time. And that would be something that scares Daniel. No, when we read this, we don't feel that kind of um, terror. We don't feel the being afraid. We are looking at this as, it's very interesting. There's a lot we can talk about, but that's not how this is conveyed. One of the things that before we end is to think this through. It has everything to do with the holy ones of the Most High. And we call that the Jewish nation or the nation of Israel. And the final kingdom will be the one that is taken away from the little horn and is given to the messianic kingdom, to the holy ones of God. And that will be the one that all the powers, all the dominions, all the kingdoms under the heavens will listen to God Himself. And thereby we can look at Isaiah chapter 2. But we are not given much information with regards to that period that is at the end here. All we know is there will be the end. But apart from that, we don't know a whole lot of things. And so that is all that we can read. And so we don't need to look at the rest of the world, because this dream that is conveyed to Daniel is primarily regarding the holy ones of the Most High, and that would be the Jewish nation then, and it will refer to the nation of Israel, God's people of all the 12 tribes in time to come. And again, we only need to be assured of what the monsters represent and what the final kingdom represent. And it's all about that Jewish nation, Daniel's people. And it is not for us to go and speculate too much and run off in a tangent to talk about other things. And with this, we come to the end of our session today and the conclusion of chapter 7.